One of the main features that I've been working on lately was to allow users to change the layering of bonds. This goes back to an old feature request by Josh in 2008 on SourceForge. So I'm finally catching up with those. As you can see here, the red bond seems to be drawn atop the black bond. This is only because I drew the red bond last, so essentially more or less accidentally. Up until now I had no way of impacting this. You will notice that essentially all the atom symbols and bond of the red molecule are always drawn on top of the black molecule and its symbols. Now we have two new operations. One to set the level or layer on which the object, so the bond or molecule or atom, is drawn at, and also one operation that's similar to the charge and hydrogen operations, where you can just move the item up or down. So you have to click on this, select the operation you want, and then click on the item on which you want to perform it, for instance this black bond. And now we will notice that the black bond is indeed on top of the red bond, and not only that, the red bond also has these little white markings that indicate in a conventional chemical sense that it's really below the black bond. You will notice that the black molecule's elements, so the bond and atom, are still below the other elements of the red molecule, and that is because the bond overlapping is calculated slightly differently. If we now just move the black molecule up a few layers, we can also solve that, and now it covers the red molecule with all of its items, atoms, and bond. In the old version of Molsketch, there was a little issue with the broken bond indicator. The broken bond indicator, you may ask? Now, if I click on an atom and clear its atom symbol, or remove its atom symbol to make it empty, you will notice that Molsketch will interpret this to mean that here the bond should be broken. Unfortunately, in the old version there was also this artifact of the charge in empty space that would then appear. But the problem I would like to address first here is that if you change the color, let's say to some bright red, you will notice that the broken bond indicator does not change its color along with the bond. In the new version, as you can see, this works much better. If I remove the carbon atom, first of all, the broken bond indicator is in the same color as the bond, and secondly, the atom that is missing is not carrying any charge whatsoever. As you may have noticed, there is now functionality to show the sum formula of a molecule. For instance, when hovering over it, we see that here, or here for the benzene, the C6H6. And when selecting the molecule, the sum formula is also shown in the status bar. Or here for the cyclopropane, the C3H6. One thing that may have annoyed people who were unfortunate enough to have to use Molsketch without OpenBabel support is indicated by the -OpenBabel label down in the status bar, is that they would have had a hard time to close the Wikidata search. As you can see, this button that you would normally use is disabled, and maybe some more experienced users may have gotten around to use the context menu of the title bar of that doc window in order to close it. In the new version, you will see that while you can still right-click on the title bar of the Wikidata search doc or any other doc or toolbar, you can also simply use the close button on the Wikidata search, even though the search itself is disabled, in order to get rid of this stock. Another thing that was improved is drag and drop performance. Notice if I search for a more complex molecule in Wikidata search, or let's say if I had a more complex molecule in my own molecule library and I now try to drag this to the scene, it freezes the application for a couple of seconds before that molecule appears on my drawing screen. With the new version, notice how this operation is much faster. Also, I just noticed there is a little glitch when you undo this insertion. In the old version there would be some lines left apparently. This is also fixed in the new version. Also with this new version, and thanks again to Alexander Plamistos, we associate the molecule files in addition to the regular drawing files of Molsketch. And I shall demonstrate this here on a Fedora system, because that is what Alexander works with and what I test this with mostly. So that if I click on the Molsketch file, as expected, you open the Molsketch application with that file opened. And when opening the window, the molecule, you get a warning that this molecule needs to be saved as a Molsketch file, or to use the Molsketch properties of that molecule in order to save that molecule here. There was a really rather embarrassing bug in the last version of Molsketch that expressed itself as follows. If you, for instance, decided to draw one bond and then maybe add another bond to that molecule, and then you decided, that's not quite what I want to do, so let's undo that last bond, and then you drew one more bond, oof, your program would be gone and crashed. Now in the new version of Molsketch, the relationship between atoms, bonds, and molecules has fundamentally changed on the code level, such that if you now try the same trick and undo your drawing and add another bond, the program should be much more stable. I'm not sure if there are other scenarios under which you could make it crash, but hopefully quite a few of those should be fixed with that. For this next bug, credit goes out to Mike Chapman, who asked a little confusedly, if I change the draw settings under file preferences and say, for instance, I want bonds of 4 pixels width, and I save that, nothing happens with my scene, obviously. It still has a 2 pixel wide bond default. And even if I create a new scene, it still has a 2 pixel wide bond as a default. And of course, this really was a bug. What is supposed to happen is, as you can see in the new version, when you change the preferences and say again, increase the default bond width, your current scene should not be altered. That's what your properties are for. But if you now create a new drawing, that drawing should start with that default that you've selected in the preferences, and that's what that's for. But again, it was broken, so it was not recognizable either way what it was supposed to do. And thanks again to Mike Chapman for bringing that to my attention, because there really wasn't any test coverage, unfortunately, for this particular thing either. One particularly embarrassing blunder in the old version of Molsketch that Alexander Plamistos brought to my attention is that charges and hydrogens were not correctly saved and then read into a new instance of your application. To demonstrate what I mean by that is, let's start with this acetic acid. Use the oxygen atom and decrease the number of hydrogens and the charge on it so that we now have a beautiful acetate anion. Let's save this as an acetate anion and open that same file again, and oops, we're back to the acetic acid. Now let's try the same operation in the new 060 nitrogen version of Molsketch. Select the atom, decrease the number of hydrogens, add a negative charge. Here we go, our acetate anion again. Save it as acetate and overwrite the old file. And if we open that same file now, voila, here we go, the acetate is still intact and as beautiful as before.